Aurora Designs was my entire world. I had built it from nothing, starting in a cramped studio apartment 12 years ago with just a laptop and a dream. Now we occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in the design district, and we had clients from New York to Tokyo. But success had never changed how I worked. Every single morning, before anyone else arrived, I went straight to the model workshop on the 2nd floor. That was where my best ideas came to life. I would spend hours there, building tiny prototypes, getting my hands dirty with clay and wood and paint. It was not glamorous, but it was real. It was the soul of everything I had created. My outfit was always the same too. Dark jeans, a simple cotton shirt, comfortable sneakers. I did not dress to impress anyone. I dressed to work. And that, as it turned out, would become the biggest misunderstanding of my career. Bradley Finn joined our team on a cold Monday in November. The hiring committee had been impressed by his portfolio. He had worked at some big-name firms, designed award-winning buildings, and had glowing recommendations. On paper, he was perfect. In person, he was something else entirely. From the moment he walked through our doors, I felt it. A coldness. An arrogance that seemed to fill every room he entered. I watched him during his first week, observing from a distance like I always did with new hires. I noticed how he snapped his fingers at interns when he needed something. I saw the way he laughed at jokes in meetings, but his eyes stayed flat and empty when he talked to assistants. He treated people differently based on what he thought their position was. And that told me everything I needed to know about who he really was underneath all that polish. The first incident happened on his 2nd Friday. I was walking down the main hallway carrying my sketchbook, heading back from the workshop. My hands had traces of blue paint on them, and there was probably some dust in my hair. Bradley came around the corner carrying a large box filled with old blueprints and crumpled paper. When he saw me, he did not hesitate. He shoved the box directly into my arms, nearly making me drop my sketchbook. "Disposal," he said, his tone flat and dismissive. "Shredding is down the hall, right?" He did not wait for an answer. He just turned and walked away, already pulling out his phone. I stood there, holding this box of garbage, and looked up. 3 members of my design team were frozen at their desks, staring at me with absolute horror on their faces. They knew who I was. They knew what had just happened. I gave them a small smile and carried the box to the shredding room myself. 10 minutes later, Philip burst into my office. Philip was my COO, my right hand, and one of my oldest friends. He had been with me since Aurora Designs was just 2 people working out of a coffee shop. His face was red, and I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. "Ellie, we have to tell him," he said, pacing back and forth in front of my desk. "We have to correct this right now. This is insane." I leaned back in my chair and watched him pace. A strange, cold calm had settled over me. It was not anger, exactly. It was more like clarity. "No," I said quietly. "Not yet." Philip stopped pacing and stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Ellie." I held up my hand. "I want to see who this man really is, Philip. I want to see the truth." So we wait. He did not like it, but he trusted me. He always had. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Bradley treated me like I was invisible, or worse, like I was an inconvenience. He would pile trash on the corner of his desk and leave it there, clearly expecting cleaning staff to deal with it. He made loud comments about non-essential personnel whenever I walked by, as if I was not supposed to be in the professional spaces of my own building. Once, he actually asked me to fetch him coffee. I did it. I brought him a cup, set it on his desk, and walked away without a word. My team was horrified. They kept asking me why I was allowing this to happen. But I had a reason. With every insult, every dismissive gesture, every cruel comment, I was learning exactly who Bradley Finn was. And I was building a case. A cold, methodical, undeniable case. The day everything changed started like any other. We had a big investor lunch scheduled for noon. These were the people who had believed in Aurora Designs from the beginning, the ones who had given me my first real funding when no one else would. I wanted to finish a last-minute concept model for our newest project before they arrived. So I was in the workshop all morning, completely absorbed in my work. I lost track of time. When I finally looked up, I was covered in clay dust. It was in my hair, on my face, all over my shirt. I looked like I had been rolling around in a sandbox. I needed water. I slipped out of the workshop and headed to the kitchen on the main floor, planning to clean up quickly before the investors arrived. But I was too late. They were already here. I heard Bradley's voice before I saw him. He was in the hallway just outside the kitchen, speaking loudly and confidently. He was explaining one of our current projects to the investors, walking them through the building like he owned the place. I froze just inside the kitchen doorway, holding my water glass. Then Bradley turned the corner and saw me. His eyes locked onto mine. I watched his expression change from surprise to clear, obvious disgust. He looked me up and down, taking in my dusty clothes, my paint-stained hands, the smudge of clay I could feel on my cheek. For just a second, I thought maybe he would recognize me. Maybe something would click. But no. He just saw what he expected to see. Someone who did not belong. Someone beneath him. And that was when he made his biggest mistake. Bradley stepped into the kitchen, and the investors followed behind him. He was still talking, gesturing dramatically about the project design. Then he stopped mid-sentence, looked directly at me, and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "You know, facilities really needs to schedule their breaks better," he announced, his tone dripping with contempt. He stared straight at me, making sure everyone knew exactly who he was talking about. "Some of us are trying to impress the people who actually sign the checks here." The kitchen went completely silent. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. One of the investors, Richard, was someone who had known me for years. He opened his mouth, probably to say something, but I caught his eye and gave the tiniest shake of my head. "Not yet. Not here." I set down my water glass, turned, and walked out of the kitchen without saying a single word. I went straight to my office and closed the door. My hands were shaking, but not from embarrassment. Not from hurt. From absolute, crystal clear certainty. Bradley had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He had humiliated me in front of the people who believed in this company, the people who had watched me build it from nothing. But more than that, he had shown everyone exactly who he was. Cruel. Arrogant. Someone who judged people based on how they looked instead of who they were. The time for observation was over. The time for quiet watching and careful documentation was done. Now it was time to act. I picked up my phone and called Philip. "Come to my office," I said. "It is time." He did not ask questions. He knew my tone. He was there in less than 2 minutes. Philip sat down across from my desk, and I could see the anger still burning in his eyes. He had heard about the kitchen incident already. News traveled fast in our office. "Initiate a full performance review for the new architect position," I said, keeping my voice steady and professional. I want everything. Every client email. Every budget report. Every piece of feedback from the team. Every vendor communication. I want a complete audit of Bradley Finn's work since the day he started. Philip's expression changed from anger to understanding. A slow smile spread across his face. Full audit, he repeated. Got it. I nodded. And Philip? I want it before the board meeting next month. I want every single detail documented and verified. He stood up. Consider it done, Ellie. After he left, I sat alone in my office, looking out at the city skyline. The game had changed. And I was about to win. Over the next 3 weeks, Bradley's behavior got even worse. I think he saw my silence as weakness. He saw the fact that I never fought back, never complained, never said anything as proof that he could do whatever he wanted. He started micromanaging the junior designers on my personal project, something we called the Evergreen Initiative. It was a sustainable housing development that I had been working on for over a year. He would stand over their shoulders and criticize their work, using my exact design concepts but claiming them as his own ideas. He told them their original sketches looked like amateur garbage. He made one of the interns cry. Another designer, a talented young woman named Sarah, came to me privately and said she was thinking about quitting. I listened to every story. I documented every complaint. And I waited. On a Wednesday afternoon, Philip walked into my office carrying a folder that must have been 3 inches thick. He set it down on my desk with a heavy thud. Here it is, he said. Everything you asked for. I opened the folder and started reading. Page after page of documented evidence. Bradley was talented, there was no denying that. His designs were brilliant. But he was also reckless and cruel. He had exceeded budgets on 3 separate projects without getting approval. He had bullied vendors into accepting unfavorable terms, which had damaged our long-term relationships with them. And buried deep in the file, transferred from his previous employer, were 3 formal complaints from female junior staff members. His old manager had swept them under the rug. But they were real. They were documented. And they painted a clear picture of a pattern of behavior that had been going on for years. The annual board meeting was scheduled for the first Tuesday in December. Part of the agenda, like every year, was finalizing the discretionary bonuses and promotions for all senior staff members. I spent an entire weekend preparing my recommendations. I reviewed every employee's performance. I looked at project outcomes, client feedback, team collaboration scores, and budget management. I built spreadsheets. I created comparison charts. And I made sure that every single recommendation I made was backed up by cold, hard, undeniable data. When I was finished, I had a presentation that was fair, professional, and completely bulletproof. Bradley Finn's name appeared exactly once in the promotion recommendations. And the word next to it was not approved. It was tabled. His bonus number was there too. It was the minimum amount allowed by his contract. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just the facts. The day before the board meeting, I was walking past one of the conference rooms when I heard Bradley's voice. He had called a meeting with the junior design team, the same people who worked on the Evergreen Initiative. I slowed down and listened through the partially open door. He was tearing apart their latest work, his voice cruel and mocking. This is janitor-level thinking, he said, and I heard several people gasp. If you cannot do better than this, maybe you should be cleaning floors instead of designing buildings. The phrase hit me like a punch. Janitor-level thinking. He had no idea how perfect that phrase was. He had no idea that the janitor he had been insulting for weeks was standing right outside the door, listening to every word. I smiled to myself, turned, and walked away. Tomorrow was going to be very, very interesting. The board meeting started at 9 a.m. I arrived early, dressed in my one formal suit, carrying my presentation materials. The board members filed in, poured coffee, and settled into their chairs. We went through the standard agenda items first. Financial reports. Client updates. New project proposals. Then we got to the part everyone always cared about most. Bonuses and promotions. I pulled up my presentation on the screen. I went through each department, highlighting the team members who had gone above and beyond. I praised the people who had supported their colleagues, managed their budgets responsibly, and treated everyone with respect. When I got to the architecture department, I kept my tone completely neutral. Strong initial designs, I said, clicking to the next slide. However, there are concerning trends in budget adherence and team morale metrics. I showed them the graphs. I showed them the numbers. I let the data speak for itself. The board asked questions. I answered every single one with facts, documentation, and specific examples. When it came time to vote on bonuses and promotions, I presented my recommendations. Bradley Finn's name came up. I explained calmly that based on performance data and team feedback, I was recommending the minimum contractual bonus and that his promotion to team lead be tabled indefinitely pending improvement in key areas. One board member asked if this was too harsh for someone so new. I pulled up the vendor complaints, the budget overruns, and the anonymous team feedback surveys. The numbers did not lie. The vote was unanimous. Bradley's bonus would be minimal. His promotion would not happen. As I closed my laptop and packed up my materials, I felt a sense of calm satisfaction. This was not about revenge. This was about running a company the right way. This was about protecting the people who actually made Aurora Designs great. Payroll day was Friday. At exactly 9 a.m., the company-wide email went out. Bonuses have been deposited into your accounts. Thank you for another great year. I was sitting in my office, working on a new design concept, when my phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID. It was an internal extension. Bradley Finn. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Hello? My voice was calm, professional. I need to speak to whoever is in charge of payroll, he snarled. There was no greeting, no professionalism. Just pure anger. There has been some kind of mistake. I kept my voice neutral. I will transfer you to HR. One moment, please. I heard him start to say something else, but I had already pressed the transfer button. I called Philip on his cell immediately. It is happening, I said. He laughed. I will grab popcorn. 5 minutes later, Philip appeared in my doorway. He was grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. You have to hear this, he said, barely able to contain his laughter. Bradley just stormed into HR. He is absolutely losing his mind. Apparently, Bradley had barged into Lydia's office, our head of HR, and started shouting about a system error. He said his bonus was an insult, that there was no way the numbers were correct, and that someone needed to fix this immediately. Lydia, bless her, had remained completely calm. She had looked at him with her professional smile and said, all compensation decisions were approved at the executive level. If you would like to appeal, you would need to speak with the founder. Philip said the look on Bradley's face had been priceless. He asked who the founder was, Philip said, still grinning. And Lydia pointed down the hall. Toward your office. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment everything would finally become clear. I stood up and walked to my office door. I opened it just slightly, just enough to see down the hallway. I watched as Lydia stepped out of her office and pointed in my direction. I saw Bradley following her gesture, his face tight with anger and confusion. He stared at my door for a long moment. I could see him trying to process what she had told him. Then his jaw set, and he started walking. His whole body was stiff with outrage. He was ready for a fight. He was ready to demand answers, to assert his worth, to put whoever was in charge in their place. I stepped back from the door and walked calmly to my desk. I sat down in my chair, folded my hands on top of the thick audit folder with his name written across the front, and waited. I heard his footsteps getting closer. Faster. Angrier. And then my door flew open. He had not even knocked. Bradley barged into my office, his mouth already open to start yelling. Then he stopped. He froze completely, like someone had pressed pause on a video. His eyes landed on me, sitting behind the large minimalist desk I had custom designed myself. The desk with the small brass plaque on the front that read Eleanor Chase, founder and CEO. He stared at me. Then at the plaque. Then back at me. I watched his face go through a series of changes. Anger first. Then confusion. Then slowly, horribly, the pieces started coming together in his mind. The realization dawned like a sunrise he did not want to see. His face went pale. Actually pale. The color drained right out of his cheeks. He looked at my hands, resting calmly on the folder with his name on it. The same hands he had seen covered in paint and clay. The same hands he had watched carrying trash. And the universe shifted for Bradley Finn. The silence in my office was absolute. I could hear the clock on the wall ticking. I could hear someone laughing in the hallway far away. I could hear Bradley's breathing, shallow and quick. I let the silence stretch. I wanted him to feel every single second of it. Then I spoke. My voice was quiet, cold, and completely steady. You wanted to discuss your compensation, Bradley? I did not ask him to sit down. I did not offer him water. I did not smile. He just stood there, rooted to the spot, all of his earlier confidence and arrogance completely vaporized. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He tried again. Ms. Chase. I did not. I held up one hand, and he stopped talking immediately. Let me save you some time, I said. I opened the folder in front of me. And I began. I went through it all, point by point. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The facts were devastating enough on their own. 3 projects over budget without authorization, I said, turning a page. Multiple vendor complaints regarding unprofessional conduct and contract manipulation. Another page. Anonymous team feedback indicating a hostile work environment. I looked up at him. And 3 formal complaints from your previous employer regarding inappropriate behavior toward junior female staff members. He tried to interrupt. Those were misunderstandings, I can explain. I cut him off with a look. I am not finished. I tapped the papers in front of me. This, I said clearly, is why your bonus is what it is. This is why you are not being promoted to team lead. This is why your future at Aurora Designs is currently under review. He stammered again. But my designs, the clients loved my work. I nodded. You are talented. No one is disputing that. But talent without integrity is worthless to me. I stood up slowly. Bradley took an involuntary step backward. Let me be very clear about something, I said. The way you treated me over these past weeks tells me everything I need to know about your character. You assumed my value based on my appearance. You made judgments about my worth based on how I dressed and where you saw me working. You spoke to me with contempt because you thought I was beneath you. I walked around my desk and stood directly in front of him. He could not meet my eyes. But here is what you failed to understand, I continued. Aurora Designs was built on the principle of mutual respect. Every person in this building, from our interns to our senior architects, deserves to be treated with dignity. The person emptying trash cans works just as hard as the person designing buildings. Maybe harder. I paused. You failed to show that respect. Not just to me, but to everyone you considered beneath you. And that is unforgivable. Bradley finally found his voice. Please, he said, and I heard panic creeping in. I made a mistake. I can change. Just give me another chance. I shook my head slowly. I gave you chances. Every day for weeks, I gave you chances to be a better person. To treat people with kindness. To show basic human decency. You chose not to take any of those chances. I walked back to my desk and pressed the button on my phone that connected to security. Your employment at Aurora Designs is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings, and then out of the building. Your final paycheck will be processed and sent to you within the week, along with information about your benefits. 2 security guards appeared in my doorway. I looked at Bradley one last time. The ultimate power is not in shouting or throwing your weight around, I said quietly. It is in being the person who signs the paychecks. I hope you remember that. I watched from my office window as Bradley was escorted across the main floor. Every single employee stopped what they were doing and watched him leave. He walked past the desks of the people he had mocked, the interns he had snapped at, the junior designers he had made cry. And they all saw. They saw that actions have consequences. They saw that cruelty does not pay. They saw that at Aurora Designs, respect mattered more than talent. After he was gone, I learned that he struggled to find another senior position. Word travels fast in our industry. People talk. His behavior had finally caught up with him. As for me, I did what I always did. I went back to the workshop. I put on my comfortable clothes, got my hands dirty with clay and paint, and worked on the things I loved. I had a company to run, real designs to create, and a team that deserved a leader who understood that every person has value. The janitor had just taken out the trash. And Aurora Designs was better for it.